You're listening to ResultsLeader.fm. Being a thought leader is easy. Getting results is hard. This show is for the results leader who lives and dies by their results. Here is your host and Chief Results Leader, Jonathan Rivera.
Yes, y'all. It's time once again for ResultsLeader.fm. Welcome back. And I'm about to fill your ear holes with another amazing interview. Today's guest went from angry punk rocker to city planner. I have Mr. Jim Benson. Let's jump into this. Jim, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here, brother.
It's good to be here.
Yes, sir. So let's serve up a quick win for our listeners. What book or books have you given most as a gift?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I think that the book that I've probably given the most is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And the one right after that would probably be Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut.
Well, nobody has ever mentioned either one of those on the show. So that is a first.
There you go.
Cool.
That's the indication of what's about to happen for the whole interview. All original content.
So let's talk about failure. And what I'd like is for you to share a story on how an apparent failure set you up for later success.
Okay. So the easiest one of those for me was there was a point in my career when I was a civil engineer, and my colleague William and I went out and we were mapping locations along highways of transportation technology. And we figured out that the maps that we had were wrong and that they had radically miscalculated where there were wetlands and other sensitive features. And we went back and told our bosses, hey, this has happened. And they're like, we have a schedule, we have a budget, we can't worry about that. So we planned the whole facility that we're working on. We get to the end of that planning. And of course, you can't go build it because somebody at some point in the end says, hey, this is going to go right over a wetland. And so they came back and were angry with us for that. And we said, look, we told you up front that was the case. And what we realized at that point was that as professionals, we had positional power or didn't have positional power. So we didn't have the agency to act, but what we did have was the agency to escalate. And we too quickly accepted failure in that case and didn't escalate when we should have. And in a subsequent project where almost exactly the same thing happened, we sat down, my colleague and I sat down and said, all right, how are we going to work our way through this time? Because we don't want to get caught in that same trap. So it was a horrible failure the first time that gave us then the insight that said, look, we have more power over the things that are happening to us than we're actually taking advantage of. We're allowing the system to cow us when that might not be appropriate.
How have you applied that lesson to business?
Oh, wow. We apply it all the time. So we work with lots of teams now. So that's my world now, is the world of helping teams and individuals and companies be more effective. And we see over and over again that people have a zone of control, then they have a sphere of influence, and they have stuff that they can't change. But when you get punched in the face a couple of times, your zone of control gets smaller. You get more conservative and you're less willing to take risks. And what ends up happening is it becomes so small that itself becomes a risk. It stunts your career, it stunts the projects and so forth. And invariably, your bosses are like, why the hell are you doing that? Why don't you just act? And then on the boss side, we say, these are the things that you're doing that are actively making these people retreat. So how do we build a right environment for all of these professionals so that they can be the best professionals they can possibly be?
What would you say is the most worthwhile investment you've ever made, Jim?
Oh, man, other than the keyboard to my left or the bass behind me. So the best investment I think I ever made was something that I absolutely did not appreciate at the time. And it's humbling to find yourself in that position. So I started my post-high school career as an angry punk rocker in Denver, Colorado. I realized at some point that being an angry punk rocker was not going to be a good long-term career prospect. And so I went to, for a year, I went back and went to the University of Nebraska. And while I really did not enjoy my time at the University of Nebraska for a variety of reasons, I had 3 professors there, 2 of which I can call out by name. One of them, both of whom unfortunately are deceased. One of them was Monty Page, who was a psychology professor, and another one was Joe Luther, who was an urban planning professor. And those 2 guys completely changed my life. So the investment in the University of Nebraska itself wasn't a great investment. And I ended up going to Michigan State. But the investment in meeting those 2 guys and having them show me that learning and people and systems were interesting and important, I will be forever indebted to those 2 gentlemen.
I want you to think back over the last 5 years. What new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
So I can't tell if it's a new one or if it's a hyper refinement, but watching the interactions of the people that we work with and understanding where those interactions have fear, where those interactions have hope, where those interactions have drive, where those have whatever we might want to call the opposite of drive. That stepping back and being able to watch people do those things has taught me a lot about myself, but it's also taught me a lot about problem solving, because most of the time you have a kernel of a problem and then you have people freaking out, which is the bigger problem. So then the question is, okay, so how do I calm these people down so that we can actually get in and solve that problem? And we've dealt with some really, really weird problems. We've dealt with sexual assault problems. We've dealt with people coming to the office with guns and wanting to shoot people problems, like crazy things that you don't expect to happen. These things happen in the workplace every day, just maybe not to all of us every day. And that being able to respond to those things calmly and quickly has been a godsend. And that's what I think it is just to watch the people. So there's this management maxim says always watch the system and not the people, but the people are the system. So it's more like blame the system, don't blame the people, and then figure out like how the system's making the people do these crazy things. That would be the thing. And it's become quite a habit, I must say. It's a weird habit to have, I know.
So when you're saying blame the system and not the people, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Are we talking culture? What are we talking about there?
Yeah, so it's a combination. So we say that individuals work in teams to provide value. So very, very seldomly does someone work alone. So even though right now you are interviewer, you have to have interviewee. So there's always some exchange, and then the ultimate exchange is the delivery of value to whoever the customer might be. All those things are collaborative acts. And when we start to set up those systems of collaboration, we tend to not think about them very much. We set them up poorly, and invariably there's a zero-sum game, and there are some other thing that's setting up one person to win, one person to fail, and then we blame the person who fails. Or you have it's like going to Vegas and playing the slots and blaming the person for the slot machine not coming up perfectly every time. So there's a system that we can impact behind everything that we do. So just like at the beginning, when we said, like the people and the teams that we were working with had a very small zone of control. They had limited their own agency, their own efficacy. And we want people to be able to see the whole system. So we'll map it out. And we'll say, get them to map it out. Say, here's all the things that happened to you. Now, where does this suck? Where is it great? Where can things be improved? Where could you collaborate more? What parts make you angry? And then we take those emotional things and we turn them into honest improvement, where we say, if we change this thing in the system, that thing that makes you mad will stop happening. But previously, if you just accepted the thing that made you mad, that thing that made you mad, it made you mad because it was going to make you fail. And someone else was going to blame you for that failure. So are there jerks? Are there lazy people? Absolutely. But are they most people? No. No, they're not. So there's a lot more people blamed for stuff than there is actual blamable stuff.
Fascinating. So what would you say are some bad recommendations you hear in your area of expertise?
Oh, that's a super dangerous question. So I'm going to try and generalize it as much as possible. The biggest malpractice that I hear in management consulting is that someone can come in and solve your problem for you, or that you can read a book and the solution in the book will solve their problem for you. You got to solve your own damn problems. You have to do the work. You have to care about the stuff. There's no W. Edwards Deming used to say there's no instant pudding. There's no such thing as instant pudding. So there are all of these management schools out there that say, if you just do these things, everything's going to be just fine. And what makes things just fine is, do you understand the people that you work with? Do you understand your customer? Do you understand your product? Do you understand how you do things every day to get that crap out? And then, are those things aligned? Do you have an internal culture that makes you hate your product? So we've worked with companies that hate their customers.
What?
Yeah. One of them is the largest entertainment company in the United States now. So if you look, on the list of most hated companies in America every year, the same companies show up over and over again. You don't get there accidentally. You get there because you actively do mistreat your customers. It's not like, it's like, oops, we became the most hated company in the world. How'd that happen? It's not like Zappos is going to wake up one day and go, oh crap, we're hated,
Right? All right. I know you were getting into that, and we were just about to get into my favorite part where we talk about results. But first, I want to ask you a question. Are you picking up what we're laying down on this show? Are you digging what we are sharing? If you are, why not make yourself a hero today and share this with somebody who can use it? Put this out on your social media channels. #ResultsLeaderFM. I'll be out there looking for you, and I'll make sure to boost it up too when I see you. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump back into the interview. All right, let's switch gears a bit and let's talk about results, Jim. Why do results matter?
Well, we are alive to achieve results. We get out of bed every day. It's highly unlikely that we wake up every day and say, boy, I sure hope I don't matter today. So then the question becomes, what do we think results are? And what we see, the anti-pattern there is that results become productivity. Results become KPIs. They become numbers for a thing that is divorced from quality, customer satisfaction, job satisfaction, or anything worthwhile. And then people beat the crap out of themselves to try and get to those numbers. And it destroys marriages, careers, lives every single day. And so what we work for at Modus Cooperandi and Modus Institute is understanding, again, that whole system that says there are individuals here. And if those individual professionals have what they need to do a good job, then they will do a good job. And what they need isn't hugs and Legos. What they need is certainty about what they can do, what they're supposed to do, how they can help, how they can grow personally, how they can make more. I've seen people kill themselves to make money for other people because they love their job. And you have to pull them back and say, dude, no, don't take a vacation. It's okay. You've made enough money for the company right now. So when I worked at a company called David Evans and Associates, our slogan at the time, and this was in the late 80s, early 90s, was we take outstanding professionals and give them the tools they need to do an outstanding job. So way back then, we had unlimited vacation, unlimited sick time, all those things that tech companies allegedly developed. We were doing that back then. And it was because we had a totally professional atmosphere. And that level of professionalism, I think, is what drives results. I have a bunch of stories about that, but I don't know if we have time for them.
Well, yeah. Tell me a story. Tell me the one that comes to mind, because there's obviously one you want to share.
The first one that comes to mind was in West Virginia at a company called the Library Corporation years and years ago. And there was a group there that was their customer support group. And we were brought into that customer support group because they were failing. They were failing miserably. Oh my God, we're so awful. And their bosses told us they were failing. We interviewed them and they were very articulate about all the ways that they were failing. And then they told us, hey, we have even our net promoter score is terrible. And so for those not listening who don't know what a net promoter score is, it's something that's measured on a scale from negative to positive 100. And it basically is the answer to that question you always get, which is, would you recommend this to a friend? It's a generic metric that shows, do your customers hate your guts? And we said, what's your net promoter score? And they said, it's 89. Which is literally the highest net promoter score I'd ever heard in the history of net promoter scores. And so I got angry because I thought they were lying to me. So I left the room and went to find somebody else and said, hey, I was just talking to those guys about their net promoter score. Like, yeah, they suck. It fell all the way to 89. And I was like, what was it before? And they're like, 95.
What?
And so I went back in. I was like, all right. I know you're not ready to hear this, but you're the best customer support group in human history. And so here's what was happening. They had a metric, which was that they had a backlog of tickets that hadn't been satisfied. And there were 2,000 of them.
Wow.
Because unbelievably high number of tickets that hadn't been satisfied. And so they were constantly being told and telling themselves, we suck because of this huge backlog. It was a small company. They did library software for like most of the libraries on Earth. And so they were very busy. And so when something would fall into that backlog, it would basically get stuck there and not come out. But the funny thing was the net promoter score was that high, which meant that the things that were falling into that weren't detrimental to the company. They just looked bad. So we said to them, look, you guys, right now you're kind of, an Ayn Rand playhouse here, and you're all fighting for yourselves. You call yourselves a team, but you're all teams of individuals. I said, this work can't be processed individually. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to divide up into 4 teams. And we want you to just recognize that some work may require different roles. And you guys think about that and do it yourselves. And so then Tony Ann and I left, and we came back a couple of weeks later, and they were bouncing off the walls. They were super excited. They divided into 3 teams, the red team, the green team, and the blue team. And they had 2 new roles. One was the smooth operator, which did all the triage. And the other was a ticket slayer, which did tickets that would take between 5 and 15 minutes. And then they developed training systems to make sure that new people or people who weren't familiar with some of their systems were able to pair up with other people. These people developed an unbelievably beautiful system in 2 weeks. And when we went to them, they were like, we're not very smart because we're from West Virginia and it's not like we're from Stanford or something. These people were brilliant. They were awesome. And again, to go back to the original point, when they started doing that, they said to their bosses, why wouldn't you let us do this before? And the bosses said, you always had the ability to do this before, so that was 13 years ago now, and they're still one of my favorite groups. They just blew it out of the water. And now they travel around to conferences and teach people from Stanford how to manage their work.
Incredible, man. So let's think back over the last 5 years. What new realization has helped you get better results for your clients?
That your mouth is a political instrument, and that things that are visual are removed almost instantly from that political conversation. So whenever we get a hold of a group that is at loggerheads about something, we will come up with sometimes a very silly, sometimes a very practical way for them to visualize what's going on. So either, write down all the root causes you might think about this and then organize them on this chart, or, whatever it might be. But the act of working tangibly with the thing that's bothering you emotionally, and the ability to see the thing you're stuck in immediately adjacent to something that someone else is stuck in, and see that with your eyes. We process that differently. So we process the verbal things kind of as personal threats. We process the visual things as narratives or stories, and we want to make the story work. And so achieving alignment with groups since having that realization has become ridiculously easy, which still stuns me. It's just like we get into meetings like that and I'm like, I can't believe this is actually working.
No kidding. I love it, man. So let's talk about your business for a second. What area of your business would you like better results?
Our online school. So we started our online school about 8 years ago. Over the course of COVID, we had lots of time to work on the online school. So we came up with a new certification and accreditation program in this visual management stuff that I'm talking about. And that's worked really nicely. It's very hard as a company of 5 people to create, improve, promote, market, and manage everything that you're doing. And so you tend to silo those actions. So it's like, I'm creating now, I'm selling now, I'm working now. And that's not always the best way to, actually, it's a completely ineffective way of managing a company. So that's where we're working really hard now and figuring out new ways for us to streamline and slipstream those different responsibilities that we have.
Jim, what results are you most proud of?
Oh, man. So the first thing that I am the most proud of is in the last pandemic, the one that lasted more than a year and a half. During the AIDS pandemic, I was part of the leadership of something called the NAMES Project AIDS Memorial Quilt, which was the largest public monument and the largest public art project in history. When I left the quilt, we had 50 square miles of quilt, larger than my hometown. It was it was the most effective thing that I had ever seen. So we brought families together. We helped people deal with grief. And we took the quilt to places that you couldn't take stuff like that before, like to Mormon temples, And it was that kind of visual thing that transcended the politics or the fear or the hate that may have been behind the causes of it. And the object itself was just undeniable. So that'd be thing one. Thing two is the personal Kanban book and my collaboration with Tony and DiMaria on that. Writing it was an amazing experience, and having the book sell really well every month for 11 years is super awesome. And then the third thing, just to make everything completely different, was in the early 90s, I worked at Metro, which is the regional government in Portland, Oregon, which is the only directly elected regional government in the country. So it's the only regional government with any power. And when I was there, I was working on something called the Region 2040 plan, which at that point seemed like a long way off. It seems like it's looming dangerously close. But we set up the growth management plan for Portland, Oregon, which is a wonderful city, despite what some people might say. And it has allowed Portland to become the awesome city that it is. It didn't fall into the same traps that other cities have as far as zoning or other issues. So that was a really amazing cutting edge project to work on.
Very cool, brother. Any parting thoughts as we're coming to the close on this one?
So just to maybe to suck up, but to come back to the word results. Results are something that we want to be certain. And often when we set out for our results, we make our plan to come out with a certain action. And the moment that we do that, we create an almost infinite number of potential failure states and one victory condition. And so figuring out instead what is the end overall result? Not I want to create exactly this, but I want to satisfy this customer need or whatever that might be. Making your target bigger makes it much easier to hit the target. Setting your deadlines in an adult professional way is extremely important. So not saying, I want it done on this date and that's it. But as you're going through, make sure that there's plenty of opportunities to learn and pivot, to use the hip term, to pivot, even if it's tiny, but steer your damn project so that you go around obstacles and don't run right into them. Most of the time that people call Tony, Ann, and myself to come in and solve problems is because they got in their, bus and ran right into the cliff. They didn't steer around it. And everybody's like, we knew the cliff was there. We just thought that we could drive through it. It's like, no, you can't, because buses don't do that. That's not part of the design consideration of a bus. So, can you see, like, we're headed towards the cliff. We're going to stop now and we're going to figure out the best way around it. That's not weakness. That's actually what planning is. So I'm an urban planner. I'm a certified urban planner. I can make plans for 50 years if I want. But I recognize that your plan is only as good as your first failure state. So understand that you have a roadmap, and that roadmap changes as you learn new stuff. That's where results come from. Results don't come from guessing and having your guess be right. That's just confirmation bias or ego.
I know that the listeners are going to want more. Where can they get more from you?
So most of our stuff now is at modusinstitute.com, MODUS institute.com. And if you go there, you can kind of gateway out to all of our other sites. There's the Personal Kanban site, the Modus Cooperandi site. But that's kind of our locus at the moment, and where you can find some interesting information, rants, and other things.
Excellent. So we will share links in the show notes. We've been speaking to Mr. Jim Benson. Thank you, sir, for spending some time with us. Thank you, our dear listeners, for tuning in. And that is another Results Leader in the can. See you next time. That is a wrap for another edition of ResultsLeader.fm. If you are out there getting results for your clients and you want to be featured on the show, go to ResultsLeader.fm now and apply to be on the show. And if you love what you're hearing, share the show, give us a rating and review, do anything to help us get the message out there. Thought leadership is easy, but results leadership is hard.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.